Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for letting Lakewood actually come back and talk to you a second time this year. As Casey mentioned, my name is Tiffany Speir. I'm on staff with the city, and with me today is Andrew Bjorn. He is our lead consultant contact with Burke Consulting, assisting the city with this gargantuan process, which is the 2024 periodic update to our comprehensive plan. So some of you may have been here a few months ago when Andrew took the lead on the presentation, and at that point, we were at the starting stages of our public engagement and also at still a somewhat starting stage regarding how we were crafting this process for the City of Lakewood. We've done a lot of work since then, and we'll provide you some updated information today. And then, as Casey mentioned, if there's any questions, we'll be happy to answer those going forward. So I'll begin sharing this. 1 second. All right, so we call it the periodic review just because we have annual updates, and as a way to try to keep it clear for our planning commission and council, we ended up calling our process the periodic review. But this is the state required 10-year periodic update of our comprehensive plan and related development regulations. And I just realized I apologize. 1 second. My apologies. Let me get started again. All right, so in the 2024 Comprehensive Periodic Review, if you didn't already know, there's been quite a bit of attention regarding housing and housing available to all economic segments in the process from the state legislature on down into local planning. And so that is a lot of where we've spent our focus so far at the city. And again, when we were here with the Affordable Housing Consortium a few months ago, part of that process was to hear from you and your constituencies about needs, issues, ongoing concerns with housing, not only in Lakewood, but across the county. Two other topics that are big areas of focus this time around are climate change and then equity in terms of not only housing, but land use, job opportunities, educational opportunities for everyone within our city. We're also going to be talking about the schedule that we're engaged in now going forward and how you may be able to engage with us. So we are looking to adopt a new comprehensive plan, essentially. For some jurisdictions, they will be able to take their current comprehensive plan, make some tweaks within it, and essentially keep the same structure. What we are actually doing is really reorganizing the plan overall. So where you may be familiar with certain things within our planning document, it will look different going forward, but hopefully it will be easier to navigate and be a closer reflection of what's required by regional and state policy and statute. So just to let you know again what the city has already done, and some of this is in response to and in anticipation of some requirements in the 2024 periodic review. But this year, the city updated its code to allow emergency housing and shelters within any land use zones where hotels are allowed. And that really is focused along our South Tacoma Way to Pacific Avenue corridor here. And also within the Central Business District, which is our downtown essentially, and our transit-oriented commercial area, which is our station sub-area. And then the other thing that was updated this year was to allow permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, and transitional housing within residential zones, mixed residential zones, multifamily zones, and again, those same commercial areas that I just mentioned. So all of that work has been completed and is in effect as of this year. So what we're doing as part of the periodic update right now is looking forward 20 years to the 2044 planning horizon. We are also anticipating once we complete this process by the end of next year, in 5 years, the state now requires, I think they're calling them, it says right there, implementation progress reports. And then 10 years from now, we will be engaged in another full review of our our comprehensive plan and the development regulations that implement it. And one reason why not only Lakewood but other cities are doing this is because it is required in order to seek regional and state level grants and infrastructure support programs. But it's also obviously within a 10-year period, things change, populations of a city changes, priorities change. And particularly, I think since the last time this was done to now, so much has changed because of the COVID pandemic and the way businesses, residents every day are living their lives. Within our comprehensive plan, there's a number of required elements and then there's optional elements. This is under state law. But just to draw your attention, again, I mentioned these before, but we do have sub-area plans. So downtown, the station district by our sounder station, and then we actually are updating a Tillicum plan to become the Tillicum Woodbrook plan. And these are all going to have their own subset of policies and priorities established. Downtown and station district are in place, but we are reviewing those to make sure they comply with housing rules as of 2023. The growth targets for Lakewood, I can't remember if these were finalized by the time we had come before the consortium earlier this year, but these are the final numbers now. So Lakewood has to plan for a total of about 9,380 new housing units. And as I think you're all aware, because of changes to state law in House Bill 1220, those have to be broken out by a certain number of units per economic bracket, I'll call it, but 0 to 30% of area median income, 30 to 50, 50 to 80, and on up. These are in non-bold and regular text where we are right now, and then the bold text shows where Lakewood needs to be planning for by 2044. And then in addition to those permanent housing units, we also need to be planning for emergency shelter units. And so as of now, there's 8 units. This is about to change with the opening of Marine Howard Place along, again, Pacific Avenue, but we are supposed to be planning for and hoping to see 574 emergency shelter units by the end of 2044. Coming back to our sub-area plans, if you look at housing and jobs, when those 2 sub-area plans were adopted, the idea was to concentrate growth in the downtown and the station district areas. So we have about a quarter of our housing units identified to come into the downtown and about 3/4 of new jobs. For the station district, it's about 20% of the housing units and about 13% of jobs, which means the rest of the city across its whole borders is the remaining housing unit numbers and jobs. I would just note again, these 2 sub-area plans were adopted in 2018 for downtown and 2021 for our station district. So they both predate House Bill 1220, as well as the new bills regarding middle housing and accessory dwelling units in single family areas. So as we move through this process for 2024, we are going to be taking a look at these 2 sub-area plans to make sure that they still are coordinated with and reflect the new changes to state law regarding housing. In terms of housing production, the number of housing units completed over the last decade, you can see here compared to some other jurisdictions, it's been basically comparable in terms of middle and multifamily housing versus single family proportionately. The number of units produced is lower than some of our other jurisdictions, as you can see here. This is the proportion of the single family duplex or multifamily units. So again, there we're a little closer to where other jurisdictions have been. Affordability, and this is not unique to Lakewood. I think all of you are well aware that housing prices continue to outstrip, and when I say housing here, I mean rent or mortgage payments, so not the building, but the housing cost, continues to outstrip income. And so right now, we have over the last decade a loss of affordability in Lakewood, as most jurisdictions have seen as well. So we started to focus in as part of our periodic update early on our housing element and what needs to be changed there. And we have had to update and gear that now that we have House Bill 1110 requiring middle housing to be located within areas traditionally single family, as well as 1337, which is similar requirements for accessory dwelling units. And then we also again have our sub-area plans. So looking at this map here to the right, all of these areas that are in yellow are where residential zoning is allowed. And this is primarily where you would see our historical single family development. The darker colors, the brown is multifamily. There's a couple of shades of brown there. The pink is our neighborhood commercial. So there's a mix of housing as well as retail and commercial. And in our red, those are areas of higher density planned in our downtown and our station district sub areas. Just a touch down here, this is where the Tillicum and Tillicum Woodbrook neighborhood planning process is engaging. And here we're in the middle of just really starting to understand the changes in part because of the two new the two new I-5 interchanges that were recently completed. And also in the Woodbrook area, the city council a few years ago rezoned much of this area to industrial. And so, yes, there's still residential zoning here, but this is a change just within the last year or two to industrial for much of this part of our city. So what do we need to be looking at? All of our Growth Management Act requirements that were established prior to those three bills, and 2021 was when House Bill 1220 was adopted. The targets that I've mentioned already and gone over in that chart. But the other things that are required under 1220 is to look at anti-displacement policies and addressing previous racially disparate impacts in a jurisdiction. So anti-displacement is something that Lakewood is trying to focus quite a bit on in its sub-area planning as well as citywide. Because, and again, I don't think this is unique to Lakewood, but we have areas of older housing that is not in the prime of its life, if you want to put it that way, and is ripe potentially for redevelopment. And what does that mean to those who currently live there? Are we going to see new housing units be built or proposed to be built that would be unaffordable to those that live there now? And if so, how does the city try to counteract the displacement of current residents from their communities, from their historic locations, and then also addressing what has happened in the past in Lakewood regarding racial discrimination? Again, not unique, but in Lakewood, we do have record of about 930 parcels and within probably the 30s to the 50s for the most part developed in the city. So before incorporation, about 930 lots that specifically had uh, covenants and restrictions that said essentially, but I'm not paraphrasing too much, if you are not white, the only way you can live on these parcels is if you are a chauffeur or a maid. And those are obviously not legal anymore, but we continue to see echoes of housing patterns and where people live uh, reflective of their race even to today. So trying to address that as well in our housing planning. And then we also have the requirements under 1220 for the work that the city actually did this year regarding permanent supportive, transitional, and emergency housing. Jumping into the other two bills that were adopted this year, this is related to, I'm just going to call them in shorthand 1110 and 1337. 1110 is the middle housing requirements and 1337 is the accessory dwelling unit or ADU requirements. What does middle housing mean? Everything from duplexes up to sixplexes, townhouses, stack flat apartments, courtyard apartments, and cottage housing. The city does already allow all of these housing types. It's just a matter now of complying with state law by expanding where they are allowed. The other note, I'll touch on this a little bit more in a minute here, but these two bills also incorporated a number of restrictions on how both of these types of housing styles can be regulated by the city, not only the housing units themselves, but parking related to them. But to touch base quickly, basically, middle housing is two units per lot in areas that have historically been single family. If you're within a quarter mile of a major transit stop, that jumps up to 4. If at least one of the units is affordable, meaning below market rate, then that is also a 4-unit allowance. However, there is a caveat. If there are parts of a jurisdiction that are not sewered, that is back at 2 until sewer service becomes available. We do have areas in Lakewood that are not yet sewered, so this will apply in some parts of the city, at least temporarily. And then our accessory dwelling unit bill requires, again, at least 2 ADUs on all lots within a minimum lot size for a particular zone. And they could be attached to each other. They could be part of the existing structure. They could be one attached and one detached, or 2 detached. And it could be conversion of an existing structure as well. So the purpose between all of this, I'll just put my own spin on this, Tiffany's perspective. The state legislature was recognizing the statewide need for housing, particularly affordable housing, and said, this is a solution we can put in place now whereby housing builders do not have to purchase land, meaning one house on one lot. They can go to an area where there may already be a housing unit standing and add to that existing lot. So land purchase is out of the equation and timing. And the infrastructure is there as well. So this is a way to try to speed up provision of housing that's so needed in Washington State. So there was a mention of the major transit stops in those bills. And just for information, in Lakewood, there is one existing and one planned major transit stop. So this is our Sounder station. Down here is a Tacoma station. And then it's not on this map, but there is a planned Pierce Transit bus rapid transit route that we think will come through from downtown Tacoma into our downtown, and then perhaps over to University Place. A couple of things here that are issues of concern for Lakewood is we are currently dealing with a 2044 planning horizon and are being required to comply with these new state laws about housing densification around major transit stops as part of our process over this next year. However, this transit stop down in Tacoma, it's coming from Sound Transit. At this point, it's not even currently scheduled to be completed until 2045. And I think, as all of us know, with the transit agencies, economic realities, plans change, things get canceled. And so the city's concern here is whether or not this station is actually ultimately ever going to get built. But we are still being required to plan as if it will, and the housing in this area is significantly changing potentially as a result. So we took our first step to try to schedule out where these things may apply with this map. This is still draft, so subject to change. But again, in yellow on this map, you'll see areas that are historically R1 through R4 zoning districts, are traditionally single-family zoning districts. The pinkish color is where we have critical areas, in this case, special flood hazard. We also have potential landslide hazard areas in brown. And then there's blue throughout these areas as well, which is wetlands and wetland buffers. The reason we wanted to identify those is that critical areas are spots where the 2 or 4 units per lot would be maybe not fully applied or not applicable at all, depending on the parcel. So all of these areas that are not covered with a color other than yellow is where we would anticipate 1110 to apply, those missing middle housing units being added potentially to these parcels. In this little U shape, this is where we're seeing a darker orange color on the residential lots. This is where the higher density, the 4 units per lot, would apply. Again, assuming there's no wetlands or critical areas of other kinds. So for instance, up here, this set of parcels might be subject to 1110, except for the wetland and critical area presence here, and you'll see it down in a couple of other spots as well. So again, this is something Lakewood has gotten this far on. Other cities are doing the same, but the information that's coming out of this initial analysis is that the state law says this is where it's going to apply, but everyone needs to understand there's going to be areas where in fact it will not because of environmental constraints. Under 1110, another source of concern for the city right now is that the state has said we may not require off-street slash on-site parking within half a mile of a major transit stop. And again, if you think back to Tillicum, that stop may never happen. It's certainly not going to happen in the next 20 years. We're saying in some cases potentially quadrupling housing without requiring not being able to require parking. And then on or off-street parking is also limited based on the size of the lots. ADUs, accessory dwelling units, we have some of the same restrictions in terms of allowing the ADUs in certain areas, but being restricted on parking. Public street improvements can't be required for ADUs. They also can't be required off-street within a half a mile of the major transit stop. And again, those parking requirements are limited for the size of the lot. Why do I continue to bring up parking? Because right now, Lakewood does not allow off-site parking. It does not allow on-street parking at all. So if we are not being allowed by the state now to say, developer, you need to make sure that there is enough parking on site for these new housing units, there's going to be an issue with where these cars will go. And the lots in our city the road system within our city in the residential areas, there are many lots that have rights of way or streets in front of them that are not wide enough for cars to park. And that's illustrated here on this map. So again, what we tried to do was show where 1110 and 1337 will apply. And that is what you will see here in this blue color, which you'll see in various parts of the city. The pink is again critical areas where limitation on development happens. What we've added to this, though, are a couple of things. Green is showing where our oak and tree canopy is located. And in our policies that have been adopted over the last year or so, the city council and the city overall has recognized the importance of the tree canopy for quality of life, as well as greenhouse gas emissions and climate change preparation. And so we are also trying to understand how the tree canopy and where it's located would be affecting applicability of 1110 and 1337. The gold areas, and there's a lot of it up here north, but there's other areas gold as well. This is where things may apply, but there might be covenants and restrictions that are going to limit the applicability of the bills. The red is where we see those rights of way that I was just talking about for parking concerns. So in these areas, for instance, in blue, where there's no question right now that we're going to have to allow more units per lot, both middle housing and accessory dwelling units. And in some cases, because they're close to either an existing or planned transit stop, we cannot require parking on site. These are areas in our city where the roads are not wide enough to support on-street parking. So the city is having to now address parking in addition to housing as part of this process. So we would invite any and all of you to provide your feedback on this, suggestions and ideas, but that is something that's a little complicating the city's periodic update. How can you engage? There's a couple of websites, periodic review just on our main website, and then also lakewoodwaspeaks.org. You're allowed through both to sign up for our little update we send out at least monthly to everybody who's tracking this. And then on Lakewood WA Speaks, you can actually submit public comment as well. We do have a number of stakeholder groups together. In 2023, we just finished forming a big steering committee that's going to follow this process through the rest of the year. And then we also have a separate one for our Tillicum neighborhood plan update. These are some of the names. You may recognize some of them. Rachel Lear, for instance, from Rebuilding Together is on it. We have residents, we have coalitions and organizations as well. And then for the Tillicum one, again, we have hopefully a variety of interests and areas of expertise on our group. So far we've done a number of open houses and other public meetings, this being one of them. So thank you again for letting us take this time with you. We actually do have next Wednesday an open house, and you can attend that public in person or via Zoom. So we would invite you to engage with that too. That will be another one where we're talking housing as a focus, but we will cover other issues as well. So I'd love to see you there. Love to have you sign up to track our process over the next it'll be 10 to 12 months before our council probably takes action. So with that, I know you had hoped that I would be done by 12:30, Casey. I'm a little bit past that, but I do want to ask Andrew if he would like to add anything to what I've done here with this presentation.
Um, uh, I think you said absolutely everything, and I don't have much to add except to reinforce the call to get people to come out. It's very important for us to hear what people have to say about housing in Lakewood. And we've got a lot of great people who are on the project, and it'd be great for you to come and talk with them and hear about what's been going on. So.
Thank you, Andrew. And then Casey, you mentioned at the start our equity map. Those of you who know about Pierce County's and the City of Tacoma's equity index map, I won't spend time taking you to it, but Lakewood has one now as well that is very similar. I'll put the link into the chat. And so you can address and get down to the census block level information about our livability, our equity issues, and use that for your own purposes as well as to inform anything you want to provide as public comment to us. So with that, I'll turn it back to Casey. Happy to answer questions, but otherwise, thank you very much.
Yeah, so this is the time, excuse me. This is the time, if we've got any questions, even if it's something that's not quite a question, it's thought, anything, we've got plenty of time for discussion. We've got time for questions, anything like that. So just you can take yourself off of mute. You can send your message into the chat and we'll discuss, or the raise your hand option. Give a couple moments for that. Thank you for putting those in the chat also, Tiffany.
Sure.
I have a couple of questions, and I don't know if this will kind of maybe get other people's brains moving too. Just trying to wrap my head around the comprehensive plan process, and I've been tracking what most jurisdictions in Pierce County are doing. And so I'm still kind of a little hazy on the process. Is it the planning department, city council, and the planning commission?
Yes, and so
Okay.
it's a legislative process. The staff will begin with whether they're doing it on their own or they're using a consultant process, but there are steps in state law about what you have to do, and there's guidance from several state agencies that explain how we need to walk step by step through this process. And then once that you start to see documents and policies bubble up, there is outreach to the public, and that's actually required now for the periodic reviews. So please, if you are tracking a jurisdiction and you don't feel they've done enough public engagement and outreach, let them know that, because it is now a requirement under the Growth Management Act. So you'd be doing them a favor as well as hopefully getting the information you want. But then everything needs to go through the Planning Commission or Planning Advisory Board, and a recommendation from that body goes to the City Council. So there would be public hearing opportunity at both of those levels. And then once the City Council or County Council has taken initial action, there also has to be approval by the Puget Sound Regional Council or certification, I should say, for those in Pierce County, those comprehensive plans. And Commerce is taking a look at climate change and other things as well, as a kind of a guidance agency to provide you some feedback. And those two agencies have to give their blessing, if you will, before these are considered completed documents. So there's Planning Commission, there's City Council or County Council, and then there's those agency reviews as well. And the public is encouraged to participate as they would like at all of those levels.
Okay, great. That explains a lot, helps to form a map in my mind. I wish I could form that right now so I could see it, but that's very helpful. You know, again, I've got my own questions for Tiffany, you guys. So if you have any questions, please take yourself off mute, interrupt me, throw your hand up, throw your question or comment in the chat. But I did have another question for you. I guess, you know, I've been, as much as I can, trying to keep track of what city council members are saying in meetings, and, you know, they're trying to understand all of this, just like everybody's trying to understand all of this. And they've got a lot of responsibility and a lot of input that they have to take into account. But if a citizen or someone in the housing sector is a little worried about where Lakewood is going in terms of what city council has to say, or what they're questioning verbally in meetings, it makes me a little nervous for them to vote on these things. What do you have anything to help with that process? Opportunities, is the open house the next opportunity for that?
Yeah, for us in Lakewood, that would be the next one. But we also have had, I didn't mention this before, but literally over the last year, it's actually been more than a year now, our planning commission with every single meeting has been talking about something related to the 24 process. And so you can go back if you really want to and watch all of those meetings, look at all of those presentations, and see where we've evolved over the last year with this information. We had to pivot, as I mentioned earlier, with 1337 and 1110 getting adopted this year. But all of that is there as background. And I would say that what you now have with this periodic review, not only for Lakewood, but for all of the cities and county, is really clear A, requirements for the public engagement, but B, requirements of what have to be included and what has to be done. And so for an advocate wanting to push for additional anti-displacement policies, additional recognition of past racial discrimination, making sure that there's enough planning for new housing units in certain parts of the city where maybe in the past they weren't allowed, that is all really clearly laid out now. And you can go to those documents and that guidance from the state to say, okay, City of Lakewood or City of whoever, are you doing this? We don't see it in what you're doing. Please show your work. Because that's the other thing we're supposed to be doing as local government, is making it very transparent, all of the decisions and why. And then, of course, once these processes are done and documents are adopted, they're subject to challenge. So if there's actually an issue serious enough that an individual, an organization, or an association feels something was done wrong, then there is a process to challenge that as well.
Great. You are a wealth of knowledge. I appreciate you. Don't be shy. If you have any, you know, any question at all too, because we will end early if no one's got any questions, which is totally fine. But if you've got even just a lingering question that might be hard to articulate or whatever, we can help you through it. Obviously, I've had my issues verbalizing my questions. So yeah, just another opportunity if you have any questions or comments for anybody in the room. Just take yourself off of mute or send it in the chat.
If not, I see a lot of familiar names and people that I've been able to work with over the years. So please feel free to reach out to myself. Please feel free to reach out to Andrew to talk about Lakewood questions or anything that you may have. And I will try to give you that open house event as soon as I can get done talking right now and put it in the chat. Thank you. But please email, phone, whatever is the easiest way to communicate.
I have this one I can post in here. I'm not sure if this is the one that you were gonna.
Oh, go ahead.
share. It's just the one that I have put in my calendar for the event. So
I'll click on it really quick and make sure it takes us to the right place. 1 second. Yep, that's it. That shows you the link and all of the information. So feel free to use that.
great.
If you don't mind, actually, I don't want to cut you off completely, Casey, but I actually have the equity map open. If anybody would like to see that, I'm happy to take us through a couple screens of it.
We've got plenty of time. We've got, yeah,
Okay.
I would say so. I think it's, I liked seeing you go through it in the city council meeting. And I wish that I could have asked a couple of questions because I mean, I still don't know what I'm looking at.
Sure.
I haven't played with it yet, but
Okay.
this is
So
useful.
for everybody's benefit, this is the Lakewood Equity Index map. And again, this is something that is similar to, constructed actually by the same company that did the equity index maps for Tacoma and Pierce County. And as I mentioned, there are basically 6 areas of breakdown for data. So this is the overall average of all of the information under each of these other tabs. It's just called equity. And it includes population, disabilities, race and ethnicity, foreign-born populations, age and gender. That kind of information is all broken out in more detail here. The map, for all of the maps that I'm about to walk through, the darker color means better results, if you will. So in this case, the quality of life, or for all of the various pieces of data that were used to create this map, the darker areas would be the quote better places to be in the city of Lakewood. And I would note too, speaking of racially disparate impact and historical uneven use and racial discrimination, you'll see here, this is Tillicum, this is Woodbrook, this is Springbrook, this is Lakeview. Those are all areas that have had historically disparate impact negatively against them. And you will see that in fact, the equity index for there is lower than some of the other areas on this map. If we jump to accessibility, that's talking about transit, internet, voter participation, food and library access. I will just note for you that you can jump between these tabs and it is separate and apart from the controls for over here in the map itself. So we weren't able to get those two to work together. So if you go to accessibility, you can also go over here and select accessibility, and then the map will change. And now you'll see the areas of high and low are changed because of the pieces of data that are rating here. So along Bridgeport, it shouldn't be a surprise. That area has better accessibility because it's along a major transit corridor. And then you have other things as well that go into the accessibility results. Livability, talking about housing prices, health, and crime rates. Again, I'll go over here and change the map to show livability. And again, these data show up differently on the map by color, but you can track how all of these pieces of information influence these numbers here. The other thing you can do with the map, as I mentioned before, is instead of looking at the city overall, you can also look at community development block groups and see the information specific to those areas. So within this block number, the index is very high. Within this block number, the index is very low, and you can get some additional data that way. Looking at education, and then again, changing the map, you'll see education attainment, kindergarten readiness, average test rates, economy, we're talking jobs, unemployment, home ownership, and household income. So I'll go down here to housing. And I don't think for any of you this would be a surprise, but here again, the darker color is a quote better score. And so the areas with the lighter color, blue in this case, has a lower score, a lower economy index. And the final one is environment. And I will jump over to that one. So this is looking at pollution at parts per million, the urban heat island effects, heavy traffic and roadways. Obviously, we're bisected in Lakewood by I-5, so that's a huge impact on our environmental score. urban tree canopy, diesel emissions, and ozone concentration. So again, all of this is information you can see citywide or by census block level. So this is another source of information for you too as well, as you start to look at if you're going to track Lakewood's proposal moving forward. This is a source of information you can use in your advocacy work. Looking to see how a jurisdiction is going to respond to the data that is available. We do have this, as I mentioned, as the Lakewood's equity score, Lakewood's map. There's other things though that have come through from the Puget Sound Regional Council, the Department of Commerce. They all have as well different equity maps and sources of information that can be used if you don't have one of these types of maps for any one of the jurisdictions. So I'm trying to stop my sharing, and I think I was able to do it, but tell me if not.
I can still see it.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
Maybe you could stop sharing because I've lost the control for it, Casey. Can you stop my sharing?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure, but we're wrapping up anyway, so
Yeah, there you
it's a
go.
good thing to be
We'll
able to
stop on
look.
that screen.
Yeah, it's all right. We can see it on the way out. Yeah, I just as we're wrapping up, everybody, again, if you have any lingering questions, we still have a couple minutes. Throw it in the chat, raise your hand, come off mute. But otherwise, there we go. Yeah. Otherwise, we are going to wrap up for the day. A huge thanks to Tiffany and Andrew for being here again. It's always a pleasure, and you guys are a wealth of knowledge and information. So it's a pleasure. Again, if you have any questions about the consortium, any of the materials that you saw today, just give me an email. My email is in the chat. I can throw it in there once more just for fun. And then yeah, you'll see the follow-up email with slides and links to things that we spoke about during the meeting. So just stay tuned for that. And then we will be sending out an invite for an upcoming educational presentation by Tacoma Public Utilities. Hopefully that'll be in December. They're going to have some increased water rates, I think starting in January, and they're going to be giving us a presentation about the ins and outs of that, helping everybody understand it. So that's probably the only lunch and learn we'll have in December. We're going to pick back up with a couple of presentations in January by the City of Tacoma and City of Puyallup. And yeah, other than that, I just want to thank everybody who has been regularly showing up to these events and participating, and it's been really nice. So thank you, and let's help continue to share and spread affordability in housing advocacy. So thanks everybody. Have a good rest of your day, and stay tuned for that email with the slides. We'll see you next time.